The summer of 1984, Los Angeles.
To the outside world, this was the city of dreams. Neon lights, palm trees, and the golden California sun.
But beneath the polished surface, a heavy, suffocating heat had settled over the streets. A heat that didn't just make you sweat, it made you feel like you were being watched.
Imagine a typical suburban street in Eagle Rock or Rosemead.
It's midnight. The temperature is still nearly 90 degrees.
In an era before central air conditioning was common,
Windows are left wide open to catch a non-existent breeze. Screen doors are unlocked.
people sleep vulnerable, trusting the silence of the night.
But that silence was a lie. Somewhere in the darkness, a 1976 Toyota hatchback is slowly cruising the boulevards.
Behind the wheel sits a man whose eyes are hidden behind dark aviator sunglasses.
Even in the dead of night, the smell of cheap cigarettes fills the car.
He isn't looking for money. He isn't looking for a specific person. He is looking for an open window. Our story doesn't begin with a monster. It begins with a child. To understand the terror that gripped California,
We have to go back to El Paso, Texas, to a boy named Richard,
a young Richard sits across a kitchen table from his older cousin, Mike.
recently returned from the Vietnam War, but he didn't leave the war behind. He brought it home in a shoebox filled with Polaroids, graphic images of violence.
Young Richard stares at them, mesmerized, as Mike describes the thrill of killing and the power of taking a life.
This was Richard's bedtime story.
By his early 20s,
The seeds planted by those images had grown into something dark. Richard Ramirez became a drifter, obsessed with heavy metal and Satanism. He moved to Los Angeles,
fueled by cocaine and a growing desire to recreate the horrors he had been shown.
June 28, 1984.
79-year-old Ginny Vinkow is asleep in her apartment. She is peaceful.
She has no idea that a shadow has stepped through her window. The attack is swift, silent, brutal. When police arrive the next morning, they know this wasn't a robbery gone wrong.
The violence is excessive, deliberate.
A message.
Still, investigators believe it is an isolated incident.
A one-time horror. They were wrong. The shadow was just getting started.
And before the summer of 1985 would end,
The name the Night Stalker would turn Los Angeles into a city of locked doors and constant fear.
make sure your windows are closed. Check the lock on your front door.
Because in the next chapter, the shadow becomes a predator, and the city realizes it is being
Hunted by a man who claims he was sent by the devil himself.
The Night Stalker, Episode 2, The Devil's Messenger, Spring 1985. For the Los Angeles Police Department, the nightmare was no longer a theory.
It was a pattern that defied every rule in the criminal handbook.
Serial killers usually have a signature, a type, but this shadow was different. He was chaos. Inside the precinct, frustration was boiling over.
One night, the victim was a young woman.
The next, an elderly couple. Then, a man living alone. There was no geographic logic,
No racial preference.
no age limit.
The only constant was how he entered through an unlocked door or an open window, and how he left behind scenes of
Ritualistic slaughter. The media needed a name for the monster under the bed.
At first, they called him the Valley.
Intruder, but the title didn't capture the true darkness of his crimes. Soon, a more chilling name appeared in the headlines, The Night Stalker, and the stalker was changing.
He wasn't just killing anymore. He was sending messages.
Investigators found pentagrams drawn on walls in lipstick or blood.
In one home, a victim was forced to swear loyalty to Satan. These weren't random acts.
They were declarations. Richard Ramirez believed he was protected by a higher, darker power. He moved through neighborhoods like a ghost, often dressed entirely in black.
Hiding his weapons beneath an oversized jacket.
Sometimes, after an attack, he would remain inside the house for hours, eating food from the refrigerator. As if he owned the place, Los Angeles began to fracture. Gun shops sold out of firearms. Hardware stores ran out of deadbolts. Neighbors who had lived
Side by side for decades began.
to eye each other with suspicion.
Every shadow in a hallway, every sound in the night, felt like a warning. Detectives Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno were running on exhaustion and adrenaline.
One detail kept resurfacing across multiple crime scenes. A footprint.
A distinctive print from an aviator aerobic shoe, a rare model, sold in only a handful of stores.
But Ramirez stayed ahead. He moved between Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Leaving bodies across hundreds of miles.
For months, he seemed untouchable, playing a deadly game with law enforcement and winning.
To the public, the Night Stalker was no longer a man.
He was something supernatural.
A force that slipped through cracks and vanished into darkness. But even shadows leave traces.
Even demons make mistakes. In the next chapter, a stolen car and a single fingerprint will change everything.
The hunt will move out of the darkness and into the unforgiving California sun.
And the people of Los Angeles will decide they have had enough. The Night Stalker, Episode 3, The Light of Justice.
August 1985.
The heat in California had reached a breaking point, just like the patience of its people. The Night Stalker had been a ghost for more than a year.
But every ghost leaves a trace.
For Richard Ramirez,
that trace was a single greasy fingerprint left on the rearview mirror of a stolen orange
Toyota, inside the police laboratory.
Technology that was considered advanced for its time, the automated
fingerprint identification system was put to work.
After hours of processing,
a name appeared on the screen. Ricardo Leyva Muse Ramirez,
a 25-year-old drifter with a criminal record for traffic violations and drug possession.
The shadow finally had a face. On the morning of August 31st, newspapers across
California carried the same image on their front pages: a gaunt face, wild hair, and hollow, dark eyes. But Richard Ramirez didn't know he was famous yet.
He had been visiting his brother in Arizona
and had just returned to the
Greyhound bus station in East Los Angeles. He walked into a convenience store, planning to buy a soda. That's when he saw his own face staring back at him from the newspaper rack. He panicked and he ran. What followed became one of the most
extraordinary moments in American criminal history. Ramirez attempted to carjack a woman, then another.
But the residents of East LA had been living in fear for months.
They recognized the face.
They didn't call the police. They didn't wait. Neighbors armed with steel pipes and
their bare hands chased him through backyards and over fences.
They cornered him on a sidewalk. For several minutes, the messenger of the devil felt the raw fury of the people he had terrorized for over a year. When the police finally arrived, they didn't need to arrest him. They needed to save him from the crowd. The trial became a spectacle of darkness. Ramirez showed no remorse.
He entered the courtroom and raised his hand, revealing a pentagram drawn on his palm.
He shouted, "Hail Satan," at the cameras.
He flashed a rotten, yellow-toothed smile at the families of his victims.
In September 1989, he was convicted of 13 counts of murder. When the jury delivered the death sentence, Ramirez leaned back and said,
"Big deal. Death always went with the territory.
See you in Disneyland." Richard Ramirez would never face execution.
He spent 23 years on death row, receiving love letters from obsessed
admirers and maintaining
his image as a servant of darkness.
In 2013, he died in a hospital bed from complications related to lymphoma. The Night Stalker was gone, but the scars he left on California never truly healed.
He taught a generation that evil doesn't always have a pattern and that sometimes
the most dangerous monsters are the ones who walk freely in the daylight.
The doors are locked.
The windows are shut. The sun is rising.
But remember,
the darkness always returns.